The Renegade Game Studios Gen Con 2020 online panel discussion for Embarcadero. And we have some awesome guests here. Some very exciting intro music for us. I am Sara Erickson, Director of Sales and Marketing here at Renegade Game Studios, and we have a couple awesome guests here to talk about Embarcadero. So let's introduce ourselves. Dan, go ahead and let us know who you are.
Hello, my name is Dan Bojanowski. I'm the senior producer here at Renegade Game Studios. I help to shepherd these games from pitch to files delivered to the factory.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm Adam Buckingham. I'm one of the designers of Embarcadero, and been working on this game for a few years and really excited to finally see it kind of becoming a product and moving forward. So super excited.
We're so excited to hear more about it. And Ed, welcome to the show.
Hey everybody, I'm Ed Marriott. You may know me from the game Scoville as well. Scoville was my first game, and I'm super excited to be joining Team Renegade for this next one. Adam and I are super pumped to be able to talk about it today and see it coming out hopefully very soon.
Excellent. Yeah, so we actually just announced that we're doing this game earlier this week. This is a super secret project we've been working on for a long time, and it's so fun to be able to finally talk about it. I know I got to see this game as a prototype a couple years ago, and actually seeing it in its final or close to final form has been pretty fun. So we're ready to share a little bit more information, and people are going to get to see this on Kickstarter in just a few short months. So we wanted to give you an in-depth dive into where this game came from and how it got to be where it's at. So before we start looking at the history and all this cool game design that we want to talk about, Adam, do you want to tell us just a really brief overview about this game?
Sure thing. So essentially, this is a kind of a mid to heavyweight Euro game. There's some tile placement. You've got these ships that you're placing along wharves on the board, and then you're going to be building buildings on top of those, stacking them up to 4 levels high. The ultimate goal of the game is to have influence on these wharves, to get your business empire known throughout the city of San Francisco, and as well as increasing your influence in the city council, and just kind of making yourself a business mogul in the gold rush era of San Francisco.
Fantastic. So picking up a few of the things you said there, this is a very historically entrenched game, and I love history and I love Euro games. So I actually did a little bit of research about this, just wondering what is the Embarcadero and what does that mean to be playing in this game. So as you mentioned, this is set in the Gold Rush era in California, and so this is set around the year 1850 or so. And one thing I found really interesting when looking into this is that in the year 1850, the city of San Francisco went from having just 18,000 people to 92,000 people when there was suddenly this gold rush. And that huge influx of people was a big boon to the city, but it also really stretched its resources a little bit thin. And about a third of all of those people who came to the city during just that 1 year traveled by boat. So instead of going the overland route, which was extremely treacherous and took quite a long time, they went a much further route all the way down past South America and then all the way up to the Gold Coast. And in this setting, in this game, you'll see boats along that wharf. And in the history, there were actually about 500 boats at any given time in that bay, which is a crazy amount of boats. If anybody's been to San Francisco, there's not that much room. And they were all in this little tiny place. So that sort of sets us up for this area in this bay in San Francisco. So explain it really, what is the Embarcadero and what are these ghost ships that you'll hear about in the game?
Yeah, so the history behind this is that all these people were heading to California because they wanted to strike it rich in the gold fields and the gold mines. And when they got to San Francisco, the crews of these ships that brought them there, they all went searching for gold too. So suddenly you had these 500 ships that were just floating out in the bay, and nobody was on the ships, nobody was claiming the ships. So you had, at the same time, San Francisco, which, if you've been to San Francisco, there's mountains and hills next to it. There's not a lot of land where you can actually build down by the water. So these business people, went out, took the ships, brought them into the harbor, and then they just docked them or ran them ashore, and they built their businesses upon that. They built apartment buildings and boarding houses and taverns and shops. And so the entire shore of San Francisco was changed during this time by these ships that came into the bay. And eventually they would sink the ships and build bigger buildings on top of them. So eventually now what you have for San Francisco, the Embarcadero region, which is kind of the shoreline downtown of San Francisco, that all was water at the time in around 1850. And since then, it's all been filled in with land, and most of it started as these ships that were built upon and then eventually sunk.
I just think that all is so fascinating and such a cool idea for a game design, because you did have these ships just out there in the wharf and things just being stacked up and built on top of them, which required resources, but then could also give the owners of those new buildings resources as well. So, if possible, our helpful producer on the back end, Chris, if you could post the board overview image for us, that would be fantastic. So I want to show everybody kind of what this wharf view looks like. So he'll work on getting that up there for us. So you're posting, oh, here we go. There, that's the main overview of the board. So as you can see, there's these wharfs that jet out from the edge of that seawall, and then there's buildings that are being put on top of these ships that you post in there. So explain a little bit in the game, maybe this is a good question for Ed. How does this work in the game with the ships and the buildings? What's going on with this interaction between the two?
Sure, of course. So in the game, when it's your turn, you've got a handful of cards. And some of those cards are going to be ship cards and others are going to be buildings. And so when you're taking your turn, what you're wanting to do is decide strategically how you want to play your cards. You can play either a ship card or a building card in two ways. You can place it as a ship and dock it on the board. And so when you play a ship card, you're going to grab a ship tile and actually physically put it out in the wharf next to one of the wharf buildings, one of the wharves. Or if you're building a ship, what you can do is play the ship card, building card in front of you, and then you take your cool, awesome cubes and you put them out onto the ship tile that you just docked in the wharf. And so what happens is you're balancing ships and buildings and how you're going to play those off of each other and trying to build buildings up higher for points or spread out through the wharf to gain influence on each of the wharves, because that'll help get you points. And so there's a lot of strategy with the hand management aspect of the game, trying to make the right decisions for scoring points with ships or with the buildings. And the other thing is, whenever you're docking a ship, they typically give you resources for the remainder of the game. And so when you're placing those ship tiles, it's a twofold thing. You get the territory out on the board, and then you also get the permanent resources available to you for the rest of the game. Similarly with the buildings, when you're building buildings, you need to have resources to afford it. And so there's this play back and forth where I want to dock ships so I can gain the resources I need to build this next building. I'm holding on to this one for a while because it's awesome. And then I want to be able to play it. I've got to make sure I get the right resources out there from docking ships. And eventually, as the game is going on, you've got a slew of ships out in the wharves, and you've built a whole bunch of buildings on top of these things. And by the time it's all built up, if we look back at the picture, these things are going to look great out on the board, stacked up. It's going to be really a spectacle on the table, and it's a ton of fun placing these out there and seeing how it all looks at the end and figuring out who's got the majority for each of the wharves. So that's kind of a rough overview of the gameplay, where you got a hand of cards. You're trying to decide, do I want to dock a ship now, or should I build this building? But if I dock the ship first, then I can build the building better because I can make it a better building. And they really all play off of each other really well. It's been a lot of fun to design and develop this one.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of really cool interlocking elements in this game. Chris, if you could actually show us the ships and building picture, I do want to just get a close-up view of some of those different elements in the game. And actually, Adam, do you want to tell us a little bit about the history of these? Are these real ship names? Are they real buildings? How about the characters? We can look at those in a second too.
Yep. So all the ships in the game are actual ships that are on record as having been in the San Francisco Bay during this time period. Most of the ones that we used in the game actually have a location where they ended up, where they were sunk, and some of them actually are still underneath the city of San Francisco today. And if you've been to downtown San Francisco, there are signs everywhere that kind of say, "Here's where this ship was." Um, so all the ships in the game are actual ships that would have been in the area. We also have landmark buildings in the game, and all of those landmark buildings are buildings that were built around this time period, within a couple of decades of when the game starts. So throughout the course of the game, you're getting these ships that actually existed. You're sinking them in the harbor, and then you are building landmarks that would have been built within that time period.
That's very cool. Yeah, I love the art in the game, the history of all of this, and the way that everything is working together so interconnectedly, and all of these really tough choices that you're making. I think that's really neat. So the characters in the game, Chris, if you want to put up one of those character cards, I think these are really interesting too because each one of the characters, like you mentioned, was actually a real historical figure who was there at the time. Correct?
Yep, that's right. So some of these are business moguls that we know today. So we've got characters like Girardelli or Levi Strauss that they're kind of a household name today. And then you've got other characters like Joaquin Murrieta, who had a really interesting story in history as a bandit who was seeking vengeance for his family that was killed. And then you've got a journalist, for example, or a boarding house owner. And all of these are actual people who would have been around at that time.
Very, very neat. Yeah, that's just incredible illustrations. I was really blown away by those. So, a quick note to our audience if anybody has questions while we're going through this, I would love to pose some questions to our fantastic designers and to Dan from our development crew as well. So, if anybody would like to pose questions, we'll get to those at the end of this. So, moving on a little bit from the history of the game, we've learned a little bit about how you play. So, let's talk about the actual history within Renegade of how this game came to be. Dan, so you're the senior producer. You mentioned that you are the person who shepherds this games that come to Renegade through the whole process with art, development, and everything else. What did that process look like for Embarcadero?
Yeah. So from Embarcadero, I got the prototype. I think you and Scott maybe had played it before, and I got to play it, and I really enjoyed it. There was some questioning at the time because this was probably 2 years ago internally about whether it was a good fit for Renegade because a lot of the games that we had been doing to that point weren't our portfolio wasn't quite as diverse as it is today, where we do RPGs and heavy games and light games and mini games and really anything under the sun. But at the time, it wasn't as diverse as it is now. But we were making an effort to get to broaden our scope. So this was a game that we thought was great. Had some really great appeal as far as the building structures on the table. The history was there. It was all firing on all cylinders. So we decided to make a go of it. One of the interesting things about this particular game is that many games that come to us that get pitched to us, most of them will like almost all of them will change in theme from when they're pitched to when they get actually released. We'll do some sort of reskinning or real tweaking of the theme to make it more marketable or less similar to other games on the market. This one in particular has not changed at all. Adam and Ed, as you can tell from their discussions so far, really have had vision for this and really have done their homework on this particular time and place, and it does really make a compelling setting. So we are all in on it and didn't change that at all.
Yeah, I think that is really interesting because you're right. A lot of the time we have to find something that we think is a good fit for the market, and designers don't always think about that process all the way through from the very beginning of when they have this great idea to when they present it to somebody. But I just can't imagine making this game without this theme. And I
Right.
really like that because I think a lot of Euro games are a little bit pasted on theme. I can tell that the designers made some cool mechanics that fit together really neatly, and then they just added farming on top because that's easy. But clearly, that is not what happened with this game. How did you guys come up with this theme in the first place? Were you interested in as a history buff, or did you come up with the design for this first?
I'll let you take that one, Adam.
Sure. I listened to the 99% Invisible podcast, and there was an episode a few years ago where they were talking about cities that had significant ocean that was turned into land for the city. And the first story they told in the podcast was about this time in San Francisco when they were adding ships to the harbor and building on them. And as I was listening to the podcast, I immediately sent an email to Ed with a link to the podcast and a link to a news article. I said, Ed, we have to make this game. This is so cool. And it just kind of went from there. So it was absolutely theme first. We
Oh,
said,
yeah.
this is the theme. Let's find a game that works with this theme that's really cool, has some cool mechanics. But the theme is the ultimate thing that we really wanted to make the game about, regardless of what the mechanics looked like. It was all about telling this story.
Yeah, as soon
Oh,
as
that's
Adam
really
sent
neat.
me that link, we literally were all in. We took it. I think we sat down like 2 days later and kind of hashed out the first ideas for how we wanted the game to work. And we knew that right away we had something that was going to be a load of fun just based on the history behind it. It just tells such an awesome story from the history side.
Chris, if you could actually post that picture of the stacked buildings close up, I would love to show again one of the parts of the game that I really enjoy. This central idea of stacking up buildings on top of each other, on top of those boats. Is this one of the first parts of the game that you designed?
We went through a couple
Yes.
different iterations. We always had the ships, and the very first iteration of the game was more of a what I would consider a typical like worker placement style game. And we play tested it a bunch, and we really liked the playing on ships, and we thought it made the most sense to take these cubes and just build up and build up and build up. That's kind of always been there. It's one of the really neat visual aspects that makes this game stand apart, and it's one of the areas that we've had a lot of design development even before we pitched it to you guys and showed you the demo that we wanted to make sure we got to a really good spot.
Yeah, definitely. We actually just had a question from one of our fans looking at this. We somebody was wondering, are there plans to make deluxe components? And Dan, do you want to answer that? They're specifically wondering for Kickstarter, is there any deluxification happening here?
Well, I guess I would start by saying I think the components are pretty great as they are. We have these structure cubes, and I actually have some visuals here that started. You know, we
Nice.
they started off in the prototype as those little wooden blocks that Adam or Ed, I don't know who did it, but Matt did a great job of spray painting these little cubes. But you know,
That was me.
but we
I
we
remember
sculpted
those.
had these little houses that are representative of the time period, sculpted, and they're different on every side. And this is like the first one, and then it got hollowed out. There's my second mold that I got, and then now we have them in different colors, and I think they all look really great. So that's a really neat component that we have. As far as the what's in the box, we think it's pretty great components. As far as deluxification, like you know like metal coins and things like that, that's not something that we have currently in the works. But we feel that what we do have for Kickstarter is pretty great, and players will be happy with what they get.
So this fan that wrote to us, this was Woni Wei Wan. Okay, I'm bad at pronouncing these. 1Y1. And this fan asked about 3D ships. And I will say, I think after playing the game, the way that the ships are is really helpful and makes it easier to play the game
Mhm.
because there are things on the ship that you need to see. And if they were more three dimensional, it would actually start causing some gameplay problems. But I think that one of the parts of the decision to go to Kickstarter did have to do with just making sure every one of these components was pretty amazing. And we got to the point in our development where we said, well, if we want to make these things as good as they can possibly be, Kickstarter is where we should take this. So we do have some fun things that we've been thinking about and when we are getting ready to go to Kickstarter. This is probably a good question, maybe for you, Ed. What's one thing that we've decided to add to the game since we started thinking about it as a Kickstarter project instead of just a straight to retail project?
Oh yeah, I'd say one of the things that really pops in this game is just the player pawns in the game. A lot of games just have standard meeple or something like that, very typical. But in this game, the development crew put together these these 4, 5, I don't remember, outstanding tools that look really amazing on the board. They stand up as you're moving them on the console track and on the score track. That's just something you don't have to do, and Renegade did it, and it really adds a little element to the game that makes it stand out and look really awesome.
Fantastic. Adam, is there anything that you really have been excited about as far as components go for this game?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things when Ed and I first were thinking about pitching this, and we were talking to each other, I said, "Is there any way that a publisher is going to pitch a game that has 160 16 millimeter cubes in it?" Because the idea of 160 cubes in a game is kind of unheard of. And well, we can always pitch it and find out. So uh, we were just super excited to see as these little buildings come together, to see the way that that all works, and that Renegade is willing to do that sort of thing because we think it makes the game really cool and looks really great on the table. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's awesome. Dan, how about you? Is there anything that we've changed in the game because it's going to be a Kickstarter that you're excited about?
Yeah, one thing that's going to Kickstarter, it allows us to reach an audience and really tap into them. And one thing that we've seen is a pretty rabid, especially from our own development of the Renegade Solo Hero series, is a solo mode player base. A lot of people love playing games solo, and the solo wasn't a part of this game for quite a while. But now we're happy to announce that we're adding a solo mode for this game that's going to be in there. That we is something because of Kickstarter, because we know that that's something that Kickstarter fans tend to like, and there's a growing base for it. We're putting in some development time to make that work, to make that a reality.
I'm really excited about that. I think that solo modes have a lot of really great purposes, especially right now with people primarily playing in their own houses, maybe with a smaller group of people. Solo mode is great because you can play the game, learn how it works, and then teach somebody who maybe hasn't played as many games or just doesn't want to slog through a rule book. And solo mode really
Mhm.
makes that a more pleasant experience for everybody. So I can't wait to see what you guys cooked up for the solo mode. It's going to be fantastic.
Mhm.
So yeah, Dan, I did have a few other questions for you regarding the development of the game.
Sure.
So were there any things in this game that started out one way that during the development process, so play testing, going through every little bit of the game and checking it, making sure it's perfect. Is there anything during that process that really drastically changed for the game?
Yeah, there's two things, and I will highlight our developer extraordinaire, TC Petty the third, who worked heavily on this game, did a great job of really kind of making it sing. What Adam and Ed did to get it to where it was great, and no complaints there. But that last little bit of polish that TC is able to put on things is great, and he pushed for two major changes. Um, that, I mean, not major. They're not fundamental changes, but they're big changes. The first one is when the game came to us, it had one type of card. The buildings and the ships were together on one card. And it made for a very, I mean, it scared me from a production standpoint. I remember the first time I pitched this game internally to the rest of the team, like the graphic designers and the artists and everybody. I said before I put it up on the screen, I said, now guys, don't be scared, don't be scared. And I then flashed a picture of this prototype card up on the screen that had like 30 icons on it and 2 pictures and a grid and then a line across the middle. It was crazy. And I said, we got a solution for this, don't worry. But this is how it's starting. So anyway, TC made the suggestion of splitting the ship and the building cards apart so that there was a nice push or pull for which cards you drew, giving each of them more meaning. And it also, from a production standpoint, it allowed us to really let the cards, let there be more room on the cards for all the icons and for the artwork to show through as well. So separating those two out was a big thing that happened during the development. The other piece is a really neat hand management piece. So in the game, you have a hand of ship and building cards that I just talked about. And each round, there's 3 rounds in the game. Each round, you're going to choose one of those cards to play. You also then will buy a card. So you're going down a card and then gaining a card. But then before your turn ends, you have to choose one card remaining in your hand and put it face down on your player board. So your hand is essentially shrinking by one card every turn, but you're building up this little pile on your player board of cards throughout those five turns of the round. At the end of that round, you then pick up those 5 cards, and that is your hand for the next round. It's a really neat, like, I don't want this now, I need to sacrifice it for later. There's a really nice push and pull there of hand management that I don't think I've seen in that way implemented in any other game. So that was also a TC suggestion, I believe, right, Adam and Ed?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's really unique in this game, and I love the way that works. I think that's just really creative.
Yeah.
Nice. So you mentioned a little bit during the development that you had this graphic design challenge and that you wanted to make sure that you split apart the building and ship cards so you had more room for art. And I must say that was a brilliant decision because the artwork on all of these cards, including all the character cards as well, is just fantastic. So can you tell us a little bit about who did the art for this game?
Yeah, the artist is Janos Orban, who's a great artist. We've worked with him before. And he did a great job. I believe Adam did the art descriptions for this, and with his knowledge of the history of what we're going for here, was able to provide great reference materials for that. And the character sketches, they really do a good job of showing the character as they would have looked back then in like a tone that would have been like a picture back in the day, not a bringing it into the current time, but looking like it was back in the 1850s. So really happy with the artwork of the landmarks. Each of those is a unique building that's very specific. So we're really happy with all that stuff. And I would also call out Melanie Graham, who did our graphic design on this. It was a long road for us to get through this and get these card frames and get the board. I mean, there is a lot of iconography in this game. Once you know it, it's very simple, but there's a lot to fit in. And it took us a long time to get to the point where we were all comfortable with players being able to parse this in their hand on the board when they're buying cards from the row. So I would call out Melanie for doing a great job of sticking with us as we sorted through all that graphic design challenges.
Each one of those cards does have a lot going on because for every card that you have in your hand, it has sort of 3 different zones on it. You have not only what the card would do if you just played it, along with the costs and everything else associated with that, but also what the card would do if you just discard it. You get some extra bonuses for that. And then also what the card would do. Let's see, remind me, there's the 3 sections. Oh, what the card does after you've played it. What the card does once it's out on the board and it's just sitting there. So there's all these different things that every one of these cards do, but it's really interesting and it does add to that experience quite a bit. And I can't imagine losing any one part of that, but it's a lot to make sense of on a card, and playing the game, it's very clear what everyone does, every card does just by glancing at it, which is an impressive feat for sure. That's fantastic. I do actually have another question from our audience members. So this is being demoed on Gen Con Online this weekend. We have several different events going on for that. People can jump in and see, even if they haven't already gotten an event ticket, they can just go and play and watch and check it out. And she is wondering, or he's wondering, if it is available for people to try out outside of Gen Con. I'm actually going to answer this one for our demo crew since they're not here. So this is available during Gen Con, and then it will not be on Tabletopia again until the next time we do an event, which we will have more of those coming up between now and the Kickstarter. So make sure to just follow our social media, make sure you're signed up for our newsletter, because we will have other opportunities for people to try this. But we want to make sure that everyone gets the best possible experience. And honestly, Tabletopia was a challenging platform for this particular game. We're so happy that they were able to even get it up on there at all for us because of those 3D buildings. They are really, really hard to make in Tabletopia, surprisingly. And there are a few minor differences because of the Tabletopia setup. We actually had to make the buildings a little bit smaller than they will be in the real game, just to make sure that they fit everywhere the way they're supposed to. So we want to make sure that when you play it on Tabletopia, we have someone there to help explain how to use everything and how it works out well, because otherwise it's a little bit dicey on that platform. We promise the real one will be much smoother. This was made as a physical game for sure. But do not fear, we'll make sure that people get a chance to play it. So another question, this person sees that the harbor has some extra room, and is wondering if the wharfs will extend out during the game to play for more ships, add room for ships and buildings. I will let you guys answer this because I know there's actually two sides of this board and we're only showing one in Tabletopia.
Sure. You want to take it, Adam?
Sure. So the answer is yes. There are two sides of the board. The 2 to 3 player side has one fewer wharf, and the 4 player side has more wharfs on it. The other thing with the extending of the wharfs, yes, that is a part of the game. So as you're playing your ships out to the board, you can extend the wharfs. And as you extend the wharf, that wharf actually becomes more valuable in points if you have the majority of cubes adjacent to the wharf. So you're extending a wharf because you want to make more space for yourself, but you're also at the same time making that a more valuable wharf for scoring during the game. So there's some strategy to that. There are a few opportunities in the game when you can extend a wharf, and you might do that because you're leading on the wharf and you want to make that more valuable so you can get more points in the game. And it's also a way to earn a little extra income. When you extend the wharf, you get a little bit of income, and having money in the game is definitely something that you're going to find in short supply at times. So finding a little way to
it's definitely tight money wise. I found that in my last couple plays. It was just always scraping for a dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do appreciate that you have that potential action where you can just take $3. Of course, that's in several games, but in this one, even $3 feels like a lot of money because you're really at the end of your rope a lot of the time. It was a gold rush, but apparently people didn't have a lot of extra cash lying around. So yeah, the other question I have for you guys having to do with the development of this game is, will the game that you're playing, like I see there's actually a copy of it behind Adam on his shelf. So this prototype version of the game and the one that we have on Kickstarter right now, is there any chance that anything will change, or is it done? We're just starting it out on Kickstarter and saying deal with it, or could things change in between now and when it's on Kickstarter?
Yeah.
Or when it gets printed?
That's a good question. Yeah, this is actually one thing that it could change. We have not sent the files to the printer. We got some early copies. What you see there with Adam is an early copy that's not the finished. I mean, it's close to the finished production is what we like, but we've already identified some things that we want to change about it to make it better, to make it more user-friendly. And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to go to Kickstarter, was to kind of see what reviewers said, what customers said, and make sure it's the best possible experience for everybody. So what you're going to see on the Kickstarter is, kind of our vision for it so far. But we have not sent the files to the printer, and we don't plan on doing that until after the Kickstarter's over.
And one other important thing to note with that, we actually are doing these demos this weekend, allowing people to play with it. Even though, it feels like you're playing with chopsticks on Tabletopia, at least you get to see it and see how the game works a little bit. And anyone who plays it this weekend, we have a survey up. And if you want to let us know what you think, tell us anything that you would love to see in the game, or anything you thought could have changed, anything you loved about the game. We want to hear about that. Those surveys are really important to us, and we actually do really read them. So if you play the game, please look for that link inside Discord, and any of our hosts, any of our demo staff will be able to give you that link as well. So we would love to hear what you think. We're pretty excited about that. Anything else, especially for Ed and Adam, anything else that you just are really in love with about this game that you think is just super cool, the best hook part of it?
I'll take that one for a second. Yeah, one of the things I personally really like in any game, let alone this one, is when there's definite multiple different paths to victory. And Adam and I worked really hard to make that a thing in this one, so that players can take the Wharf majority route and try to win points that way. Other players may take the city council track route and play a lot of the red colored cards in the game to make sure that you're moving up on the city council and reaping those rewards. And so what we found is there's a really good balance of the different options for trying to win, and all those different paths to victory make it totally different from game to game. It's definitely a game where you could find your favorite ships and try to play those every game, but that's not the way it was designed. And we know that there's so many fun paths to try out that you're probably not going to do that. You're going to play it, and there's cards that are going to come up, and you'll be like, "Ooh, I haven't played that one before. I want to try that. Wow, that building's really awesome. I'm going to try for a level 4 building," which is tough to do, but it's another one of those options. And so that's one of the really good hooks for me when we were play testing and demoing and everything, was trying to find out what all those different paths are and just have fun exploring the game itself.
It's fantastic. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so one of the things, and Ed kind of touched on the edges of this, but there are a lot of choices you have to make in the game that feel a little bit agonizing when you make them. Because of each building and ship has a couple different ways you can play it. Maybe you've got this ship and you really want to dock the ship because it's got 3 resources on it that you really need, and getting it out there would really help you. But you're also out of money, and there's a card in the market that you want to buy, and that ship can give you money if you scrap it. So now you have to choose, do you want to try to dock the ship and get the resources, or do you want to scrap it so you can get the money and get the better card that you want in the market? And every game there's 2 or 3 times where you just have this moment where, oh, I need to do this. Oh, but I can't do that because I really want this card for something else. And so kind of that difficult decisions that you have to make are to me one of the best parts about the game.
I can't tell you how many times when I was playing this last night that I really wanted to dock a ship, but I didn't have the money to dock a ship, but I needed to dock a ship to get more money. I was clearly doing something that was not yet optimized, and I want to go back and do it better again.
Oh, yeah.
To me, that's the sign of a good game. What was that, Dan?
I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in on the same question. So one of the cool things that we haven't touched on in this panel yet is that the game takes place over 3 rounds, and at the beginning of the game you lay out 3 round scoring cards that dictate what another avenue of scoring for everybody, and that's different every game. The order of them will be different every game, but at the beginning, okay, in round 1 it's going to be whoever has the most buildings out. In round 2 it's going to be this type of building. In round 3 it's going to be whoever has the most money left or whatever. So you can see that at the beginning and really work towards it. Or you can say, okay, I'm going to not work on the second one so I can really be awesome at the third one or whatever. And I think that's going to add a lot of variability to the game, a lot of replay value, so that every time it's different, but it doesn't come up and spring up on you. It's something from the very beginning of the game and can plan for the whole game. which is great.
I will say that I think most Euro games fit into one of two categories. Either it's optimized immediate choices, so you look at the board state and all the options you have and you pick the best thing that you can do right now, or they fit into long-term planning. And if you really like thinking ahead 4 or 5 turns, then that would be like a long-term planning game. I feel like this does both of those things because you do have an immense amount of long term planning. You have all of those goals set out at the beginning of the game that you know you're working towards. There's all of the pre planning of the way that your hand management works, of having to play a card, draw a card, and discard a card every single turn, the way that, and then get all those cards that you've essentially discarded back into your hand for the next round. All of those things are really long-term planning, but optimizing the choices that you have with the resources that you have right now is so vital to being good at the strategy of this game as well. So I really like that it actually fits into both categories really smoothly. So one thing Chris is actually asking, who do you feel is the target audience for this game? So are these people who would enjoy this game maybe heavy Euro gamers? Are they strategy, puzzle, historical? Where do you see this fitting?
I think it
Guys,
fits
wanna go
all
ahead?
three of those, actually. I think that's a really good way to put it. You cover a lot of different genres here with the history that's so thick in the game, and you've got what we consider kind of Euro style hand management. But then at the end of the game, you've got this awesome looking board where these buildings are all stacked up, and you're never going to have two games look the same. And so you're going to have people walking by at a convention like Gen Con with this on a table, and they're going to be like, wow, what is that? That looks really cool. And it's going to draw people in. And I think that because the decision space or the choices in the game are either you're going to dock a ship, you're going to scrap a card, or you're going to build a building. There's only those three choices, really. It makes it very accessible to a wider range audience, going anywhere from a lighter game like a Splendor or a Karuba, all the way up to like a Altiplano style, game where you can play it light and have fun with the buildings and play it that way, or you can play it deep and strategize throughout the whole thing. And I think it really is open to a wide range of people. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing how people react to it and embrace it. And I really want to see those photos on social media of what the board looks like at the end of the game with all the building cubes like that. It's going to look great.
Yeah, it's
That's
kind of this
definitely
interesting. It's an intersection of you've got a Euro game. It's a pretty meaty Euro game, but it's also really thematic, which is fairly unique amongst meaty Euro games, and it has a huge toy factor, which is not something you see in a lot of Euro games. So you've got that stacking structure. You've got that spectacle on the table that just kind of looks cool. So even when you're losing the game and your friends are doing so much better than you, at least you can try to build a tall structure, or you can have a little bit of fun with the components of the game.
absolutely. Yeah, I think those are all great answers. So there was someone asking about the variability and setup. We did cover how the goals for the game are actually randomized and those come out separately. But I think also importantly, those special buildings that you mentioned, the landmarks, you don't see a lot of those in the game. And those actually come out as you're moving along this track that's kind of on the left side of the board that you move on for a variety of ways. Different abilities and things when you're playing buildings or playing ships allow you to move on that track. And when you cross certain points, that'll trigger putting one of those buildings out, one of the special landmark buildings. So you don't see very many of them, and they are pretty special and they do pretty different things. So every game that you play, you're not going to go through that whole deck. And the same thing with the ships and the buildings as well. Those, you're not going to see all of them in a whole game. If you did go through the whole deck, you would shuffle them, but at least in the games I've played, I haven't seen that whole deck yet. And so there are definitely a lot of different things that happen during the game that you might not see if you only played it once. So anything
There's
else
also
either
there's
want to
the
add?
starting there's your starting character that is variable. What we showed on the screen there was the A side of it, which is the kind of straightforward firepower ability. It just had like a starting resource in the upper right corner. On the back side of all of the character cards is the B side, the more advanced side, that has a ongoing ability, a one-time ability, and an end game scoring ability that are all unique and will steer you in different ways. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to be given one of those, which will be variable and kind of steer your strategy as well.
Mhm.
Man, I feel like there's so much about this game to talk about and so many little things that we haven't even covered. Everyone should go and play this game. And if you can't play this game and you don't have time to go through a whole demo, you can jump into any one of those channels and just click the watch button, and you can actually see people playing in Tabletopia, even if there's not an open seat for it. So definitely go and check this out through our Discord channel. And if you're wondering how to get to the Discord channel, just go to renegadegames.com. The very first thing you'll see at the top of that page is a big banner to go to our Gen Con landing page, and there's a link to our Discord there. So it's a little bit of a roundabout way to get there, but it's really, really easy. Just go to renegadegames.com. And I'm just going to do a last call for any questions here. So we did have one more question, and then we'll do a quick wrap up. So the last question is, how much player interaction is involved in this game? We did talk a little bit about how you were developing a solo mode, but I know at the very beginning you did not have that in here because there is actually quite a bit of player interaction. So Ed, do you want to talk about that for a moment?
Sure. Yeah, one of the really big aspects where player interaction comes in is on the wharves themselves. One of the scoring conditions in 2 of the 3 rounds is Wharf Scoring, and it acts as a player majority where each of your building cubes on a wharf will be 1 influence point, and whoever has the most influence on that wharf will win the points from that wharf. That's where extending the wharf to make it more valuable comes into play. But whenever you build a player cube at one of those awesome buildings next to an already existing player building, then you move up the city council track. And that's where you're getting a lot of these in-game bonuses, and you're moving up in points on the city council track. And so there's a lot of thoughts like, I have this ship. Do I place my cube in the middle so nobody can build by it and they won't get those city council track points, but then maybe later I can? Or do I want to just put my ship perpendicular to the wharf and only put the 1 cube there and make sure I've got it, and maybe leave it open for other people to interact with and build next to, and then they might get to move up the city council track. And so there's a lot of playing off of each other for wharf majority throughout the entire game, because as you build up, each of those cubes stacked up counts as wharf influence. And so it's definitely a big aspect of the game.
Yeah, I really, when you guys started talking about solo mode, I was a little worried because this game is so interactive that I thought this was going to be a challenge, but I have faith in both of you. I think it's going to be awesome. So we have another silly question. Oh, before we get there, I was reminded by Chris that we do actually have a really easy way to get to our Discord if you just go to renegadegames.com/Discord. In fact, that works. So that's very smart. Thank you for setting that up, Chris. Also, we have a silly question for each of you. I'm going to start with you, Dan. Who do you consider your board game designer spirit animal, and who would you like to be compared to?
My board game designer spirit animal. Wow.
That's a tricky one. I'm glad you're answering and not me.
I would probably go with Shem Phillips. Gotta love Shem, and his games are great. But he does a great job of he does it all. He's a designer. He manages the company. He puts a lot of theme into it. He does great work as far as the components and managing it. So I think as far as being an all well-rounded game designer that does more than just design games, I really look up to Shem and think he does a great job, and I thoroughly enjoy his games as well.
I would agree with that. He is just a wonderful person. And he's actually going to be on a panel with us later this weekend. So if you want to go to renegadegames.com, again, we have a schedule of all of our panels that we're going to be doing. So check that out and go listen to Shem chat about games. It should be fun. All right. So Ed, who is your board game designer animal, spirit animal? It can be an actual animal too if you want it to be.
Oh, well, then it's going to be a red panda because red pandas are awesome.
Okay.
I love them. But if the first name that popped into my head was Antoine Bauza because of the breadth of game design that he's been able to put to the table. I mean, Seven Wonders was one of the first games that got me really into board gaming. And there's a lot of icons, but it's such a fun game, and it was so unique. The other person that came to mind was Bruno Cathala for some of the same reasons. He's got a lot of breadth in game design as well. Adam and I have met him personally. He's an awesome guy. He gave us some insider info once that we can't talk about, but he's a great guy, and he's one of these guys that is just fun to hang out with. He's a great game designer, and you can tell that he's doing it for the fun. And that's one of the reasons I'm into board game design personally. I like it because it's a fun thing to do. It's a hobby for me, and it's great to end up seeing people playing my games and having a good time.
I love that. That's awesome. All right. How about you, Adam?
Can I say Ed Marriott?
Designer? Yeah, that's good. I like that one. Nice.
I mean, I think someone like maybe a Jamie Stegmeyer, because a lot of times when I'm thinking about a game, I'm thinking about what the end product looks like as I'm designing the game, and trying to find a way that, this is a total product. And I think Jamie does a really good job of that. As a publisher / designer, he's thinking about it from a publisher's perspective right from the get-go of what's this going to look like on the table? How are these different mechanics going to interact with each other? And how is the theme going to be really tied with the mechanics of the game? And I try to do that as well when I'm designing, and hope that I can kind of get a little piece of that.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Okay, Ed, I have another very important personal question for you. So I've been doing a lot of gardening this year because I've been at home instead of at fantastic conventions like Gen Con. So I tried really hard to grow some jalapeno peppers. Out of all of the things I tried to grow this year, those failed the most. So What is your favorite kind of pepper so that I can maybe plant some better ones next year? I know you designed Scoville, so you should know a lot about peppers at this point.
Yeah, a lot of people try to get me to eat hot peppers. Somebody brought in some Carolina Reapers to the work office the other day, and I'm like, wow, guys, keep your hands away from your face. Don't touch anything. What's ironic about the question is I don't actually like hot peppers. Spice hasn't been one of the things for me. So what kind of pepper? I don't know. Just go with a habanero and make sure they get a lot of dry sunlight. That'll be good. And then you can use that for all sorts of stuff. Adam is definitely more of the gardener than I am.
The correct answer is Serranos. Serranos is the correct answer. Yeah, and let them get ripe. They'll turn red and they get a really nice flavor, and they're spicier than jalapeno. So you get a little bit extra spice, but you get a really nice flavor if you let them ripen to the full red.
Okay, well, next year when I'm planting my garden, I'm going to call you because now I've had all my peppers. I had 3 of them. They've been planted since early May, and they have not grown past this big. They still have the same number of leaves. They're still sitting there looking exactly the same. No peppers, but that's okay. All right, so getting back to Embarcadero, we did have one more question from our fantastic audience that we're going to do just before we jump off here. So they're wondering when the draft rules will be published. So Dan, do you want to tell us about the current state of the rules? Are these pretty good to go? We're going to be putting these up pretty soonish.
Well, that's usually a Sara question.
Oh, that's probably true. That's fair.
I mean, like I said earlier, as far as the Kickstarter goes, I mean, the rules are kind of where we had them, and we're comfortable with them. There's a few changes we're making, and we're adding the solo rules and all that. So I would imagine that for the Kickstarter, when I'm sure Sara will plug the Kickstarter, but that one, when we have that up, we'll be putting the rules up. And maybe before.
Absolutely.
That's up to Sara.
Oh man, I have to make hard decisions. Yeah, we do have the rules that we sent off to our demo team so they could learn and play the demos this weekend. So we will be posting those pretty soon. And we want to make sure that everybody gets a good look at them because we have nothing to hide with this game. We're really proud of what we've done, really excited to get it out to people, and we'd love a lot of eyeballs on it. And who knows, maybe you'll catch something that we missed and we can make it that much better. So we're excited to get this out into the world. And so, yeah, before we end, please go play this weekend. If you get a chance, we would love to have any feedback. We would love to have people get to see this and enjoy it. I had a blast playing it last night with our demo crew. It's really a different, interesting game. And so you just have to go to renegadegames.com/discord to be able to find our Discord channel and check that out. And our demo crew will be happy to teach you. Also, we are going to be doing a Kickstarter for this. So if you would also like to go to renegadegames.com, you're going to see a pop-up to sign up for our newsletter. If you sign up for that, then we will be giving you all the details when this is ready on Kickstarter later this fall. We're actually getting pretty close to putting that up, so make sure to check that out. And then you'll also get a nice 10% discount if you sign up for our text messaging service along with that newsletter. So that's a nice little thing you can get a bonus. That's right. Get a little bonus and go buy something exciting on our Renegade booth, which is open all this weekend. And we'll be shipping anything that people order as soon as possible, right when it arrives, even before the release date. So gets you everything early, which is the whole point of Gen Con, is to buy games early, right? That's at least what I have figured out from going to Gen Con for many, many years. So we're giving people a chance to do that. So play games with us. Let us know what you think. Fill out those surveys, sign up for our newsletter, get ready for this to be on Kickstarter. This is Embarcadero, and our wonderful development and design crew here would love to have you be part of that Kickstarter community. So thank you everyone for all of your wonderful questions, and we will see you around. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.